I'm making a 4 foot tall beholder, and I want it displayed in front of the house.
Like a Dungeons and
And
Dragons beholder.
yes, like the whole family's doing this except for her. We're all going to paint it, and I want to display it. And she's like, no, that's grotesque. It should be hidden in the back. So, it's hard to be married to somebody who doesn't always appreciate great art and the genius that goes into creating it.
Yeah. A beholder is just an amazing beast to try to conjure up in front of your house. I love it.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Hello and welcome to the Technically Friends podcast hosted by Harrison Wolf and Timothy Reuter. My name is Harrison, and if you've listened to us before, you know that the reason Timothy and I created this podcast was to find a way to highlight the amazing people we've met who are much more impressive and generally harder working than both of us. There are folks with deep expertise in some intersection between technology and society, and who continue to achieve success in their field as key players across business and government sectors or launching their own efforts to drive positive change.
And I'm Timothy. In general, the people we talk to are on their way up, not the well-established C-suite, but the new executive, the director who's navigating their career, or the youngish visionary founding startups from the ground up. We're tired of only hearing from the people who made it and really want to hear from the people who are still dealing with the challenges of politics, bureaucracy, home life, and global influences. If we do this right, it will be as if you're listening in on a meaningful conversation between three work friends talking about the more interesting aspects of life, the universe, and everything.
Now, we're about halfway through the first season of this podcast, and so far we've heard from a lot of you and decided to offer video and audio on YouTube, as well as our audio-only formats on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Check us out wherever makes sense for you, and please do subscribe, share, rate us, berate us, like whatever needs to happen to get the message out there. And now we're really excited for the conversation today with someone I've known for a long time, since graduate school at Pepperdine University, and who Timothy is just meeting literally for the first time today. Our guest today, Matt Leighty, is someone who I've known as a student, as a colleague working on drone policy materials in Virginia, and most importantly, as a ping pong doubles partner between classes in Malibu. He has a wicked forehand, a reach that honestly should be considered cheating because he's very tall. And for us short people, it's hard to get anyway. And also as a founder and chief strategy officer of GrantFlow, a Virginia-based company helping nonprofits and local governments strengthen their grant infrastructure so they can do more good with less burden. And while this is no small effort, at least that's what he tells me, I'm not very familiar with the grant writing experience. Just in the last 10 years, he and his team have raised more than $250 million mission-driven organizations and created this new tech platform, an AI-enabled grant writing platform designed specifically for the nonprofit sector. Before this, he worked at Virginia and California politics and health policy. He's run campaigns. He's at the intersection of public policy, funding, and community need, and somebody that I think continues to really try to do good in his work, which is someone Timothy and I would love to talk to any day of the week. So outside of work, Matt is also a musician. I heard him play in Santa Monica, I think, at an open mic night one time. And he lives in Richmond with his family and is currently writing a book on grant systems and another on morality, which I think will be really interesting. And other than that, his tagline is to help those do good. Sorry, time out. Pause. His tagline is his passion.
I think we should leave this fumbling in.
Okay, maybe I should. His
Comedy
passion is
gold.
simple: to help those who do good good more easily. And there we go. So, Matt,
I'm
welcome
doing
to
great.
Technically
It's
Friends.
wonderful to hear you
How
say
you
nice
doing?
things about me. It might be the first time. Fantastic.
We're contractually obligated, I think, yeah. So that's good. And, we're excited to have you. I think I was looking at sort of your LinkedIn recently as we were preparing for this pod, and just like the amazing number of career transitions I thought you had. actually make a lot of sense in what you're developing now, which is this grant flow platform, from the grant writing side to I think some grant analysis side, and now actually helping folks get access to the funding they need.
It's a bit confusing because it's the name of our company and it's also the name of our platform. So GrantFlow originally started as a full-service grant writing company, and I grew from just me being a solopreneur writing grants on a laptop in Long Beach to having a team of 11 grant writers working with me. And I needed something that would track their work, and there was nothing out on the market that worked. Built one for myself, and it tracked what was going on and when and how things were due. And I built that prior to the AI revolution. It was a platform that was out there that I used to monitor my own team.
Mm.
And then AI came out, and of course, everybody said you have to integrate AI into it. So we built our own AI bot. His name is Ulysses, which stands for Ulysses S. Grant, because I'm hilarious. I also enjoy being in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy, and naming after the correct general.
Perfect. Fantastic. So that's awesome. And you were solving a problem of needing to have insight into what your writers were doing, but it also like helps get grants, doesn't it?
Yeah, it will help you do different sections of grants as you do it. What you do is you upload all your past work into the system. So let's say you're writing a grant to Bank of America. It saves all that information like a traditional CRM, but it also saves the documents associated with doing that grant.
Mhm.
And Ulysses can read all of your grants that you've ever written uploaded, but it will fetch them to you. So if you say, I know I've written a grant about this before, can you help me find it? It goes through your library of materials and brings you the relevant grants or other documents that you've uploaded so you can verify that the information you're using is correct. There's a lot of ad hoc questions that come up during grants. What's our EIN? What's the total staff size? What year were we incorporated? So it searches all that. So if you've ever done the work before, you don't have to redo it from scratch. One of the problems we're trying to solve for is that in nonprofits, they're very unstable. So the average grant writer lasts about 11 months within a nonprofit. And a director of development, the chief fundraiser, lasts on average 16 to 18 months. So there's a constant cycle of people coming in and out of an organization, and they lose sight of what is happening. They know this foundation has funded us, but why? And who do I talk to there? So it's about anchoring those relationships between the organizations and making sure that anybody stepping into that role, which people do quite frequently, will have the most relevant and up-to-date information at their fingertips to get started.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about AI and grant writing, both little picture and big picture. You mentioned that your platform is AI enabled. Does that mean that AI will actually sort of produce a grant document for you based on some prompts? How do you incorporate AI?
It's not about learning new things from AI.
Okay.
The job of a grant writer is often synthesizing dozens of documents, let's say comprehensive economic development strategies, which counties put together, the governor's economic development plan, the RFP, et cetera, et cetera. Your job is to know that information, and you can use AI to help you synthesize that down. So the work that we do, precise is important, and it might say, you have 500 words to explain everything about yourself. That's a challenge when you're doing that as a grant writer. Now, I have about 15 years of doing it the hard way, just me and a blank sheet of paper. And I find that AI can help you do that concisely. But you have to yourself understand all of that information, or the AI will still make things up sometimes if you've used ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. So it's about making sure that you are in control of the AI itself and that it helps you find maybe a shorter or pithier way of saying something. But it's not intended to be just wholesale, hey, let me drop a grant in and it'll create it for you. Looks like AI, it smells like AI, and funders don't like it. But using AI as a tool to help you go through iterations and drafts, it can be very helpful. So when I use it, I'm using it to get to draft 37 a lot faster. rather than just drop it in and take whatever the AI gives to me.
And do you think that AI sort of changes the balance of power in grant writing a little bit? I mean, you could imagine sort of it allows very small outfits to more rapidly produce things and compete with larger nonprofits in certain sectors. Or what do you think is the implication of this? And just, in the interest of transparency, I run a small nonprofit that looks at space policy, and I've used AI to help me write grants and ensure that my style is aligned with, what the government agency wanted the style to be.
I don't know if you know that there's no actual definition for what a grant is. It's like vegetable. There's no actual definition of what a vegetable. There's shoots and leaves and stalks. So there's no definition of what a grant is, even though every year $1.5 trillion is transferred from point A to point B in the United States via a mechanism called a grant. Now, within there, the majority of that is federal dollars, and I'm sure you're probably going to ask me about that later. But in private and corporate dollars, it's about $150 billion a year in grants. Now, within that, there's a spectrum, right? So some are almost entirely relationally based. It's not about the quality of your application itself. It's about who you know, the old style. And on the other side, there's a metrics-based grant. Hey, they're looking for people who move certain digits. We're looking for people who are addressing affordable housing or education. And so this helps you fulfill the technical application part of the grant, and it frees you up to do more of the relationship building. Right now, a nonprofit might hire a development director who's in charge of raising the revenues, and you hire them because they're good in a room. They're good out in the community. They're good at the Chamber of Commerce event or this dinner or breakfast or whatever. And then you say, now 50% of the time, I want you to in your office with the door shut working on a grant application. You've just taken your best player and sidelined them. So either it's about working with us at GrantFlow, where we have grant writers who will actually do this work for you, or it's about giving you tools that help you minimize that 50% down to 30%, to 20%, so that you can be out doing the things that will have the biggest impact in terms of fundraising for your organization.
I know you've spent a lot of time in higher education, right, in the academic world, and probably a lot of your clients, I would imagine, are like in that sort of academic space. Do you have a particular sort of love for working in academia? Are you like when you were going through and developing your own career, like what kept bringing you back to the academic world?
Honestly, now most of my clients are just pure nonprofits. I would call them mostly social safety net organizations. So food banks and free clinics, education organizations, things like that. I think earlier on, I didn't know what to do. And whenever I went to school, I got good grades and people told me I was smart. And I just kept doing that to get the positive feedback. And I had to go out and actually learn how to do things on my own. So academia can be rewarding if that's what you're looking for, but it can be frustrating too, because the point of learning things is to put them into action. And if you don't step outside of academia and actually try things and become a practitioner, you run the risk of just being a know-it-all who's never actually accomplished anything. And that's my least favorite type of thing. So I frequently find myself to be a practitioner with an academic background or kind of an academic who works in practice, right? And I never feel quite at home in either world.
I guess that makes sense, especially considering like when at Pepperdine, for example, there were a lot of people who went there with the same ideology or along the same sort of mindset that the school is known for, like that more, conservative approach. You might think of the Reagan Library and those kinds of places affiliated. You weren't necessarily like that, and that didn't spell failure at Pepperdine. That actually like maybe even elevated you in our cohort because you could have those conversations and that was meaningful. Has any of that translated into the nonprofit space where, everyone is coming from a different background?
Yeah, I went to Pepperdine sort of on a lark. I wrote an essay pretending like I was a conservative Republican, and I won the Faith, Family, and Freedom Scholarship to go there. And that's how I ended up going. It was surprising to them when I got there that I was a liberal. What I found at Pepperdine was actually that I really liked it because I could talk and be myself, and that the professors there were kind of bored with just conservatives who thought conservative stuff, and they wanted sparring partners. So I remember the first day, I derailed Ted McAllister's class arguing with him about gay marriage, right? And it kind of derailed the entire class. And he called me that night at like 7:30, and I was like, oh crap, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. And he asked me to be his research assistant, right? And it was just such an interesting
Wow.
place to be, where I kind of think about it like the Princess Bride. You know, they weren't going to kill the man in black until they healed him first. That I owe it to myself to understand somebody's arguments at their best before I take them down. It's easy to set up an idiot straw man and beat up on them, but why don't you engage with somebody who's arguing with you from a different point of view at their best? And that doesn't make you weaker. It helps you think your thoughts through more clearly and sometimes come up with different answers or different solutions. In the nonprofit world, it doesn't come up a ton, but it gives me exposure to a lot of ways of thinking, a lot of ways of being. And I, again, am working more with practitioners. I affectionately call them the B team. Politicians come and go, but this team be here before the politicians, and they'll be there after the politicians. And they're the people who are executing on a mission, a body of work. That's who I find myself drawn to now. Rather than engaging with politics at a higher level, I'm working with the people who are still mission dependent, no matter who's in office. A food bank still needs to run whether Trump wins or Kamala wins, right? Now, one will obviously make it easier and one might make it harder, but the fundamental mission doesn't change depending on who's there.
Actually, the perfect lead into my next question, which is, how do you see the grant writing sector evolving in a period of both less investment and more politicization?
Sure. The way I envision it, Timothy, is imagine like a garden, and there's all sorts of flowers and vegetables growing in there. And the way it's watered is through these hoses that run through it. They're all old and they're tangled and they're kinked together, and it doesn't make much sense. And there's leaks, and some of them are spraying out in weird directions and things like that. Now, I don't think anybody would argue that the way federal funding was put out before was optimal. But what the Trump administration did was simply turn off a few of those hoses. And the effects are being felt because of the way they all snake together, oddly in different sectors. So this might be a grant from HUD, but it has to do with STEM education. Could we have cleaned that up before? Yeah, one might argue that we should have. But now we've certainly turned the dial off. Private funders can't keep pace because they're like watering cans that walk around and can just handle certain sections. So the impacts are going to be very broad, and I worry really deeply about the social safety net falling apart. In particular, free clinics and food banks are among my highest concerns from what I can see. Free clinics lost Medicaid recovery. Many of them lost what is called Ryan White, which is HIV prevention dollars were cut. And coupled with that, they're at an increased risk for ICE raids because they tend to serve whoever comes in. So they're very, not only scared, but they were already underfunded. Their funding has gone down, and they have more hoops to jump through. Same thing with food banks, where due to SNAP cuts, you're likely to see increased users of food banks, but those same bills allowed food banks to buy from farmers, and it doesn't any longer. So you're going to see the cost of buying food to distribute at food banks roughly double. At the same time, you're going to see increased usage. So I worry about those the most, the social safety net the most.
I mean, but do you have any advice for people fundraising in that sector, or just they're
I
screwed?
mean, they are all used to being screwed for so long that this isn't really shaking them too much, Timothy. They're all used to moving along in this. These are people who are showing up to work and their chairs are duct taped together. I have one client whose office literally used to have a horse trough in it from when it was a converted barn. So these are scrappy people who are used to scrapping along. The advice I have is that I think we're moving into this era that I'm calling like the era of algorithmic accountability, whereas AI is not being just used for writing grants, but for reading them. And AI isn't moved by a heartfelt narrative. It's moved by numbers and digits. And so as we've grown this grant economy that is incredibly large right now, what funders really prioritize, Bill Gates had a lot to do with it in the early 2000s in terms of making numerically based investment decisions. So funders increasingly want you to be able to prove your value. I like to say that charity died a while ago, and now we live in the era of philanthropy. Charity was giving freely and expecting nothing in return. Philanthropy demands a return on investment. So you need to be able to show what your investment return is to succeed in this environment. So those places that aren't data savvy are going to fall behind. And that's most frequently community-based organizations, smaller grassroots organizations, because despite the fact that funders all want those metrics, they won't pay for you to have a data specialist who helps you figure out how to do that because they consider that an egregious use of funds and overhead that they also hate. So I like to say everybody wants the number and sell E20, but nobody wants to pay for the person to put that number there. So we're dealing with, a lot of nonprofits are dealing with that. They're not as sophisticated data-wise as they could be otherwise. Just because you can measure it doesn't make it important. And just because you can't measure it doesn't mean it isn't important. So think about like good sportsmanship in youth sports. You know, how do you quantify that? Like, do you want somebody to keep a list of every time somebody was a good sport, every time somebody was a bad sport, and, you know, talk about trainings? Or what's the value of giving a kid an art class by their newfound love for, you know, the arts or exploration? And when you get so number heavy, you sometimes we're forgetting the things that are important, which is your community should feel good. It should feel vibrant. It should feel like a place that you want to live. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get at. They're just doing it a lot of times through increased quantitative metrics. Now, on the other hand, I'm not anti-metric entirely. Like, it's important to measure and quantify certain things, but we have to be careful about striking the right balance between them. And I think we're overcorrecting really hard in terms of demanding metrics for every little thing to say that it's important.
Yeah, that connects to one of the questions that I had for you, which is, do you have any thoughts on effective altruism and trying to do cost benefit analyses, maximizing lives saved per dollar? I mean, in some ways, your motto, helping those who do good do more good, seems aligned with this concept. On the other hand, you're also somewhat critical here of algorithmic accountability. So, is effective altruism part of the ecosystem you swim in, or do you think that was a mistake that's sort of gone the way of the dodo with its taint associated with Sam Bankman-Fried?
I have mixed feelings about all of it, Timothy. Having worked in it for so long, it's a lot dumber than you would ever imagine it to be. And a lot of effective altruism ends up funding your sister-in-law's nonprofit that she just started, that you think is going to do a real good job. How do we address it and change it? I don't know. I've spent my life with the seekers. So I find nonprofits that are good at what they do, and I try to help them do more. And that's where I've been. I don't think that a lot of the big money altruists spend time downstream, right? You're not going to get real feedback from luncheons with cloth napkins when we're talking about dealing with people who are in distressing levels of poverty. But I don't think they are willing or able to go actually spend time in those communities and translate up. So they're listening to intermediaries who are often, I feel, more interested in getting themselves on a TED Talk than solving an actual problem. It's a lot better for one's career to develop a theory or approach that gets you on a conference circle than it is to remain rooted in place and actually try to solve a problem. The incentives are all off there unless you find those people who are just deeply rooted and committed to that work. I'm always impressed by the clients that we have and their commitment to the work. There's no awards on their walls. There's no plaques. Nobody ever thanks them. Again, literally duct tape chairs and offices with horse troughs in them, but they show up every day. How do you connect those people to the bigger money? I don't know, because they're uncomfortable going there often, and the big money's uncomfortable coming down to meet them where they are. And I think there's a need for intermediaries. I have grown to have a large enough client base and work with enough nonprofits that one of the things I'm trying to do is say the things that an individual nonprofit can't say, because you can't criticize the hand that bites you. I think that's the exact phrase, right?
Totally.
But, they're unable to levy real criticisms because it might interrupt their funding. So I called this funder here in Richmond and I just said, hey, do you know you have the worst grant application in the entire city and that everybody talks behind your back about how stupid and complicated this thing is? And they had no idea because nobody had ever told them before, because there's no way for them to tell them without feeling threatened about losing their own dollars. How do we address that? I'm not sure.
So is that sort of, when you say you're writing a book about the morality of nonprofit work, is that sort of a good example of what you're talking about, is some of these power dynamics, is moving money around to the places that can do the most good while also, what are you thinking about when it comes
I'm
to
thinking
morality
about
in
my own
nonprofits?
stuff. I have a complicated thing, and that my entire business is based around something that is really difficult for nonprofits that I think shouldn't be necessary. What is the morality of my own business in terms of doing that? What is the difference between feeling good and doing good? That's something that Angela Hawken challenged us to in grad school. And it's really nice to make a big donation and get your name on something, and it feels really good. But did it actually do any good? And I don't know that people are willing to go that deep with what they do. And if I step in and interrupt it, am I actually doing more harm than good by forcing them to change those garden hoses snakily run through a, garden? I am uncomfortable with my role in that as well.
It's interesting.
I mean, surely, I assume in your book you're going to get into issues surrounding distribution of power. And so one critique is that a lot of these activities are sort of providing temporary pain alleviation that stands in the way of larger structural change. And I guess, how do you think about that? I mean, should people come to, our three houses and burn them down to redistribute what we have? Or what do you think are the real levers of change?
I think that a lot of people mistake efficiency for effectiveness. And right now, with the inability to get enough money out there to everybody, there is a great focus on maybe consolidating some nonprofits and combining back offices and doing that. But that's also a consolidation of power that shuts out a lot of grassroots voices who do a lot of work downstream. So what are we being effective at? What is the effectiveness that we're looking for in terms of doing that? I think it's about making communities a better place from people who they can develop relationships with and trust. So I encourage people to think about not consolidating these efforts, keeping them all individual and empowering more grassroots voices in the work that they do. Understanding that there is a lack of efficiency there, but democracy isn't efficient. The most efficient government is a pure autocrat. We have prioritized something other than efficiency in our own government, which is, admittedly a bit frayed right now, and we're seeing some of that at the moment. But that having more voices come together is in fact better and more efficient in the long run, if you want to say that way.
Maybe. So, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I don't know if you've been following sort of the abundance movement with Ezra Klein. And it's gotten a lot of pushback. Something that I care a lot about is affordable housing. And one of the critiques of the abundance movement is that having so many local voices that can put up blockages to constructing any sort of additional housing or power lines for renewable energy is part of the reason why we are not getting enough of these goods. And while sort of progressives, and I consider myself in many ways aligned with progressives, very much focus on process and inclusiveness, that can often come at the expense of actually getting people affordable housing and actually delivering renewable energy. So how do you sort of think about that? Or do you think Ezra Klein is a neoliberal shill?
No, I like it. I just think that I would hope that he and I would both agree that what we're talking about is real grassroots voices and not performative grassroots voices. And that a lot of these regulations and things that get in the way are just liberals performatively doing inclusion when they shouldn't. When we're talking about affordable housing, I tend to think about it as something here in Richmond. We're close to DC, and it frequently becomes a launching pad for future careers. We need more elected officials who want to do the job that we hired them for in the first place, as opposed to who are running for this office as a stepping stone to another office, right? To stay rooted and do those things. And if you're really listening to your own community, they want affordable housing too. I have an affordable housing client who's building bridges and doing these things right now. And it is possible. But I would say that there's a lot of performative inclusion that is unnecessary, that is simply done to win longer term political points. And if we were able to scrape that out and focus on the people who are our people, we could really get things done. Maybe that's just pie in the sky, though, Timothy.
No, it's interesting. My question, I guess, about all of this is when we talk about power, when we're talking about communities, we've seen a pretty significant consolidation, it seems like, at the state level and the federal level to try to take over and really lead policy formation from the top down. Have you seen success in policy development from the bottom up and really influencing the direction of solving problems that you're trying to solve? Or are you seeing sort of what I'm seeing, which is this top down attack on all of these policy challenges?
We help the people who do good more easily. Right now, it feels like we're helping the people who do good have less terrible things happen to them. And it's difficult to build up to a state of actual change when you exist in just a state of constant survival. And a lot of that is the funding mechanisms itself. The most commonly done thing is to give grants 1 year at a time, to fund things 1 year at a time. So these people are just trapped in a constant state of survival, which doesn't allow them to move on to the next level of thinking. So some grant makers are starting to move to general operating grants and giving multi-year gifts that can provide some stability to that system that will allow them to, drive some of the upward change. I'm suspicious of concentrated power in any form, whether it be a community foundation taking over smaller foundations and concentrating the giving just with them, whether it be a government doing it just for them. It's like people never read The Lord of the Rings. You're not supposed to want the ring. That's the whole point. Those are the things that make me suspicious in general. When things get too concentrated, some people get excited and they say, look at how efficient we are. And I'm thinking, look at how much we've lost. Look at how many voices are not in here any longer.
Let's take a little bit of time to talk about your sort of personal experiences and journey. Tell us about how you got started co-founding Grant Flow and perhaps what have been some of the unexpected challenges.
Sure. So I graduated Pepperdine with Harrison in 2010. It was a particularly terrible time to be entering the job market. I remember getting an interview with the city of Santa Monica and being very excited. And when I showed up, there were 350 people there to interview. So one of our professors, the amazing Angela Hawken, I was working at the Pepperdine Graduate School Library at the time. She came in to check out a book, and I was there, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Looking for a job." And she said, "I have one. You start on Monday." And so I started working for her. We were studying probation and parole reform. So I've been to prison in 7 states. I got to leave at the end of the day, though, Timothy. That's an important distinction. And to do the work, we had to write grants. So I started writing grants to the federal government was my first experience. And then I had to administer and report on the grants, which is terrible. So I left and went to UCLA and wrote grants there for a while, but part of my job negotiation, I said, I'm just on the capture side, not the execution side. And then I left and went out on my own and hung out a shingle. And I did it at the time that I recommend everybody do it is you move to a new city. I moved to Long Beach where I had no clients, no contacts. I had an 8-month-old and just needed to make it work. So I joined the Chamber of Commerce and I called every single person in it asking if they knew anybody who was looking for a grant writer until I got enough work to sustain myself. And from then, it was just a matter of, I believed that if I did good work, my name would get out there, and it did. And I continued to grow. That's really how I got into it, was just sheer force of will. And I remember I used to work 8 to 5 getting work, and then I'd have dinner with my wife and my son. And then I'd do the work from about 9 to 2 in the morning and then repeat. And that was about 2 years of that, getting things going.
Well, I mean, recessions are often a motivator to entrepreneurship, and that's inspiring to hear how that
It's
played out
funny
for
because I
you
never
in a
thought of myself as
socially
an
oriented way.
entrepreneur. And in fact, I absolutely hated that title. There's something still about it when I hear entrepreneur that I find it disgusting.
Maybe it's because you're expecting to go on Shark Tank and pitch yourself or something. I mean, also because we had a lot of friends in the MBA program at Pepperdine that were
Well, I never got an
left a
MBA, but I
sour
did
taste.
figure out how to do a PowerPoint all on my own, which is, I think, the point of most MBA programs. I wanted to work on things. I wanted to solve problems. I became a business owner and doing that because I had to in order to do the things that I really wanted to do. I wanted to work with more nonprofits and help them do more stuff. That meant I needed to have a vehicle for them to pay me. And then as it grew, I had to hire somebody to help me. And it wasn't like I was trying to grow a business. I was trying to get more people working with me solving this problem together. The goal was never to be a successful business person. The goal was to work with other people solving these thorny problems. And I tend to view grant writing as public policy. And it is public policy where government policy has failed. Most of my clients exist at the end of where government relief falls off. They're there to fill the gaps. And it used to be that they filled that last mile between where government left off and where there was still a gap. With government support going away, that last mile is becoming the last 5, the last 10, the last 15, and it's really unsustainable. But they were there to solve those problems. And I became interested in how those people were doing that and how they worked both with government and really how they worked despite government. I'm also one of those progressives. I believe in government, but I think that we can also look at its many shortcomings that it has and look at these organizations as those who've stepped in to fill gaps in policy. If we study why these nonprofits exist, might be a good lens for addressing public policy. And most of the nonprofits I work with would be happy to go away. They're not here just to have a job and be there forever. If government actually stepped in and did what they did reliably, they would happily fold their nonprofit up and disappear.
I mean, do you actually think, would it be better for the government to run food pantries than grant funded community organizations? I mean, that's sort of the implication of what you're
Potentially.
saying.
It all depends on the setup, Timothy. The devil's in the details. Is it the federal government, the state government, a local government? I don't know. Could we just get people fed? However it happens, it's necessary to make sure that our communities have enough to eat. I haven't done the deep dive on that so much as I have just got a food bank client and I see the challenges that they have, and I'm trying to help them get the money so that they can stay open. It's sort of that same thing, that survival mentality. I haven't done the thinking long term. What would this look like if it were different? The one thing that I really like about what I do, sort of to pivot off that, is that I'm sort of issue agnostic, right? There's issues that I wouldn't work on. Like I'm not going to work on a pro-gun thing or, whatever. But we work with animal shelters, with food banks, with free clinics, with education, with workforce, with environment. The common pain point for all of them is that grants suck. They're hard to do. They take a ton of time, but they're completely necessary for their survival. So I found this niche. I frequently call myself the garbage man of fundraising. It's the job that nobody wants to do, but you notice when it's not being done, right? And that's where I found us and my team. And I've got this amazing team that I haven't talked about enough, 11 of us working on this together. And we're people who I like to call introvertuous. They're introverts who like to make a difference and do good. So our tagline is like, we're here to help, but we'd rather not be. They're the people who want to be in the office working on a grant, shut away. They don't want to be at the Chamber of Commerce event. This is how we feel like we can use our skills to make a difference in the world and feel good about it. And we get to work with people across all sorts of issue areas. And it's like getting paid to learn about all these things, to figure out how affordable housing works in Kansas City or what's going on with workforce development in Tacoma, Washington, right? It's really interesting. It's really fascinating. And all of them, they're there to address a really meaningful problem that we can prove statistically and help them move the needle in some way on it. I wish that we were moving the needle forward more often than we are right now, but it seems like we're just keeping things afloat, right? Our boat is sinking and we're just patching holes at the moment. I'd like to start getting somewhere. I felt like we were slowly, but these recent changes at the federal level have really set a lot of the system back.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's
you
not
say
awesome,
weird
but I
things like that
appreciate your
all the
answer.
time. So like writing a grant and you're like, how many of these veterans are disabled? And they're like, all of them. And you're like, that's great. That's not great, but it's for the purposes of the
That's
grant.
awesome.
For the purposes of the grant, this is
I'm glad we have an
there.
answer.
So, when I see things, when I see high poverty, high crime, low education, that's where I'm like looking for. That's where I want to be, because that's the place where we can make the biggest difference. So business turns away from that. We turn right into that because that's where I think we can have the most effect.
You might actually be surprised by how much the similarity there is to like the engineering world and the tech world, where they say, look for the biggest problem you can possibly try to solve and solve that one first. Don't look at the other thing, the 80% solution, not the 20% problem. And it's sort of, you're looking at how can we create the most good where the people are having the greatest problem. It's very similar in my mind. And I don't know, I appreciate the way you're thinking about that. Well, look, I know we've been talking now for almost an hour. I guess I have a couple more just questions for you personally. Like, you have a growing family.
I have 2, and we're not planning to grow it anymore.
Okay, yeah. So maybe not a growing family,
Yeah.
but a family that is growing upwards. They're getting bigger. And, you mentioned you had, I think, an
Yeah.
8-month-old when you sort of struck out on your own. How has that influenced like your risk tolerance? Like, have you been investing your time and energy only when you thought you absolutely had to and survive, like you kind of in the beginning? Or is it now you're able to pick and choose the direction that your career is taking you, and developing like this AI platform?
I think I must just have a weirdly high risk tolerance, because I did that when he was 8 months old and I really needed to make it work. And then when things were working, I took my life savings and put it into building this AI platform, the CRM grant flow platform, which was another huge risk. I don't know. I know that I'm smart and that I work hard and it's going to be fine. This is maybe some white man hubris, but it's earned over the years that I know that I'd rather go down swinging on this than not, right? Like, I think I can make a real difference here, and I want to just keep doing this for as long as I can until I can't do it anymore. I do think about them all the time, and it's actually something that ties back neatly. It's Pepperdine that sort of like runs the undercurrent through all of that, and it's Alexis de Tocqueville. It's self-interest rightly understood. I'm better off when my community is doing well. So serve your community and make your community work well, and that's better for me. It is in my best interest to live in a thriving community. It's better for me, it's better for my family. And so that's sort of how I think about it.
And do you play pickleball?
I just picked it up. And I've still got that forehand right down the line,
Nice.
man. That pickleball
Me too.
forehand right there.
Yeah. And if you you get into the kitchen, you're tall, so you can reach.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
you're
no,
I'm sure
I
you're
haven't
good
done a
in the
doubles
front as well.
pickleball, but if you and I meet up, I'm sure we would dominate everybody.
Next time I'm at Langley, I'll stop by and we can do that. Well, this has been a great conversation. I'm really glad that, Matt and Timothy, you got to talk. I think, if we all were having a beer somewhere, it would be a fun evening. And one thing we always ask is whether or not you'd consider us technically friends now. And over the years, certainly we're technically friends. Timothy, you guys just met. I don't know. You guys are
It's
maybe
a
just
little early. We've actually, I think now almost had one person who really paused on this question and it wasn't clear where they
I
were
think
going
we're
to go.
technically friends, Timothy,
I'll embrace it. I'll embrace it. I mean, maybe we're even better friends than Harrison. Harrison's always saying things
Yeah,
like he's happy
exactly.
about disabled veterans. So, I say different weird things,
Exactly.
but I don't say stupid stuff like that.
perfect. Yeah, and I think that's a great place to end it. Timothy, you've got a kid in your background, so I'm sure you're in demand. And thanks so much, Matt, for making time today. I look
All
forward to
right.
sharing this with
Take
everybody.
care, guys.
and
Thanks for
having a
having
beer
me.
sometime. Cheers.
Great talking to you.
And that wraps up today's conversation with Matt Leighty and Timothy Reuter and myself. I think we touched on some really interesting thoughts. If you have any comments or questions, if you want to follow up with Matt Leighty directly, please reach out to us. And if you made it this far, like, subscribe, and share. We hope to get the word out. And if you think that you'd be a great guest on our podcast, please reach out. We're always looking for interesting folks to highlight in their careers and talk about the world as it exists today. To all my government colleagues, good luck. If there's anything we can do to help during this time that you're furloughed or the time is off, again, please reach out. Thanks again. Bye.